The Resident Evil franchise has always had a tentative relationship with multiplayer games. While they have experimented with the prospect of playing together, rarely has it worked out perfectly. In the past, Resident Evil fans got their first taste of multiplayer with the Outbreak games. A fun, unique take on the fixed camera survival horror genre, but ultimately a flawed experience. Resident Evil Outbreak and Outbreak File 2 had teams of up to 4 players cooperating with one another to try to take on the undead hordes and escape whatever level they were on. But this game was online only, and at the time, online co-op games were still in their infancy. This, coupled with the fact that there was no voice or communication chat bar a few ad-libs, led to frustration, unfortunately, that prevented Outbreak from reaching greatness. In all honesty, the Outbreak games are prime for a remake, and would be something I would like to see in the future. Later on, Resident Evil Darkside Chronicles and Umbrella Chronicles had players joining up for a co-op retelling of the major events that occurred between Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. The unique aspect about the Chronicle games was that it was an on-the-rails shooter, so players didn't have that much freedom when it comes to exploration or anything like that. It was more a fun co-op arcade experience. Then Capcom would release Resident Evil 5, which had the option to play the entire game in co-op. Resident Evil 5 being the first in the main numbered series to have multiplayer, it was received with mixed reactions. Some people thought that the co-op aspects of Resident Evil 5 took away from the survival horror, but from Resident Evil 4 onwards, the series had taken a more action-orientated route. This was later mirrored in Resident Evil 6. But with Resident Evil 6, we got to switch between different teams of characters that was supposed to lead to a more epic story, but ultimately fell a little bit short and ultimately disappointed fans. We also got the Revelation titles, which gave us more co-op experiences, with Revelations 2 having a very unique take, with the protagonists having different skills and roles. Then came, how should we say, more experimental titles, which included Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, a co-op romp with up to 4 players, this time playing on the side of Umbrella as mercenaries during the events of Resident Evil 2 and 3. Next came Resident Evil Umbrella Corps. This had players in PvP situations going up against one another whilst trying to contend with zombie annoyances scattered around the PvP maps. But unfortunately both these titles were received with very negative to mixed reviews. Resident Evil then went on to go through a bit of a revival period with the release of Resident Evil 7 and the remakes of 2 and 3. To which it was inevitable that Capcom would want to take another crack at some form of Resident Evil multiplayer. Enter Resident Evil Resistance. Resistance is an asymmetrical multiplayer-only game clearly inspired by the likes of Dead by Daylight and Friday the 13th. 4 survivors have to clear 3 floors and escape the clutches of a 5th player who takes control of the mastermind. However, unlike other traditional asymmetrical games, the mastermind is not a typical monster. Instead, they have access to a CCTV security system to monitor the survivors' actions. Accompanying them, they also have a deck of cards which represent different types of traps and monsters they can deploy around the map in order to stop the survivors from escaping. This is also coupled with ultimate abilities in the form of Mr. X, William Birkin, and other various tyrant-esque monsters. Also, should a mastermind get bored of just watching the CCTV cameras, they can take matters into their own hands by controlling certain zombies or their ultimate ability to take on survivors firsthand. On the flip side, the survivors each have their own set of skills that they can use in order to survive against the mastermind, which come in the form of a personal skill, which is on a quicker cooldown, and a fever skill, which is more like an ultimate ability that can sometimes really turn the tides. Add to this iconic Resident Evil characters such as Spencer, Annette Birkin, Jill Valentine and more, and you'll have the workings of a potentially fun PvP Resident Evil experience. I like the game, I want to love it, but unfortunately, Resistance suffers in its current state, with numerous flaws. Whilst most asymmetrical games have teething issues when it comes to balancing, Resistance is ripe with them, and there seems to be little communication by the developers to if they will ever be resolved. Balance is something you want to get right in your PvP game, regardless of the genre. This is the main issue where Resistance seems to be having issues, and the main source of my frustration with the game. There seems to be 2 sides to the argument. Either the masterminds are overpowered or the survivors are overpowered. But regardless of which side you are on, ultimately there is no middle ground that leads to fair matches. It's normally a case of one side steamrolling the other. This can take the form of overpowered survivor abilities that come with incredibly quick cooldowns. I'm looking at Tyrone with his kick that can interrupt the Mastermind's ultimate during their kill animations, Valerie's healing spray that can also resurrect fallen allies at a moment's notice through duels, or even Becca's infinite ammo ability that can be reduced to a minute cooldown, and God forbid she has a rocket launcher that she uses in unison with it. On the flip side, for the Mastermind, some matches can be over in a couple of minutes, should the Mastermind have access to the right deck, level presets, and buffs. I'm looking at Daniel's vampire build, for example, where the Mastermind can buff up an armoured zombie and then almost decimate an entire team.
Why did I bother building all of these mechanisms for you if you are going to move so slowly that the tortoise with that lift could overtake you? You stepped into my game and it's...
On top of these overpowered abilities, decks, cards and more, there is a myriad of cheesy tactics employed by players, such as controlling the security card holding zombie and running away in circles around the survivors, or abusing the invincibility frames that doors provide to avoid tyrants. These can really make for an unenjoyable experience. Resistance is all about reducing or increasing the timer at the top of the screen, but the amount of time reduced and gained seems to be all over the place, with survivors sometimes gaining time easily, resulting in matches with 10 plus minutes left on the clock by the time they get to the exit. This sometimes causes masterminds to rely on their turrets rather than monsters in order to reduce the chances of survivors gaining huge chunks of time from killing even a simple crawler zombie. Ultimately, this may be something that needs to be looked at. Reconfiguring the time gained or lost from certain actions needs to have maybe less impact on the overall match's progression. Speaking of progression, when it comes to character progression in the game, this is also a little concerning. Obviously there is no skill-based matchmaking, which isn't a bad thing, but the sight of being a level 1 mastermind going up against 4 level 40 plus survivors does not fill me with hope. Coupled with this, the fact that masterminds and survivors at high level more than likely have access and employ the best abilities and customizations, ensuring that new players to the game, or new characters, as each character does have their own individual level, are going to be in for a rough time. This issue though could be a difficult one to resolve. Most players dislike skill-based matchmaking, but there comes a point where you are fed up by being stomped by 4 level 50 survivors as a level 1 mastermind, or vice versa. Maybe some form of ranked mode that removes or limits abilities and augmentations could resolve this, but I'm by no means a developer, so I cannot say for sure. Lastly, one issue that often crops up that needs to be resolved is connection issues. Well, okay, yes, some connectivity issues are down to the player's internet connections, but I have had enough of seeing the unstable connection to mastermind message across my screen. On top of that, there have been numerous cases of players abusing connection issues to guarantee themselves wins. Playing matches when you get grabbed by a zombie that you passed 2 rooms ago is never fun, and ultimately is another issue developers should be aware of. Ultimately, at the end of the day, Resident Evil Resistance is a young game. There is bound to be tweaks and balance adjustments made as time goes on, but I just worry, as if the issues are not alleviated soon, then we will start seeing people drop off quicker and quicker. Reddit is filled with folks unhappy with the current state of the game, stating it's no fun to play. They say playing as a survivor is boring, whilst playing as a mastermind is a depressing experience. This is what makes me sad, as I want to love the game, make content on it, stream it and more, but given the current state, it can be infuriating. It's like a lottery to if you're going to get a good game or not. Other asymmetrical games had problems akin to these in the past, but they were resolved, and I hope Capcom can do the same before it's too late. If not, the game's lifespan will be a concern as player count dwindles, which I would hate to see. So there we have it. Resident Evil Resistance needs some love, but if Capcom can deliver, it could be a great experience. But what are your thoughts? Leave a comment down below, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, and I want to love Resident Evil Resistance. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.